So, for my latest thriller ranking, we are going to look at the Governator himself. I didn't do him on the Comeback series, mainly because he didn't go away because of his film career, he went away because of his political career, and then came back. So, sod it, we're just going to skip to the ranking of the thrillers that I've got for Arnold Schwarzenegger. We are not going to include any of the comedies, even if they do have action in them, so no Twins, no Kindergarten Cop. None of the silly fantasy stuff like Batman and Robin, and believe me, yeah, wonder what that would be. And no cameos, so I'm not going to do the Expendables movies or Around the World in 80 Days or any of that nonsense. Just the straightforward action stuff with Arnold in a leading role. And let's get going. So, slap bang at the bottom, Terminator 5, Genesis. Yes, one of the worst films known to mankind, and I don't mean Batman and Robin, of course. Instead, at the bottom, we have the fifth Terminator film. It promised to go all Back to the Future 2 on us, and then fumbled the trick completely, and then abandoned it halfway through. Utter waste. It's all been said before about the miscasting of just about everyone, and Arnold plays the worst iteration of the character to date. Get the fuck out of here. Red Sonja. After Conan came Prince Vladimir or something? A horny guy who just wants to get it on with the titular leading lady played by Bridget Nielsen. That may have happened in reality between set pickups, but on screen there is zero chemistry, and she won't give it up anyway unless she can get beaten in a sword fight. Oh yes, and there is adventure afoot. From the director of the Conan sequel, but much less impressive in every regard. Arnold even steals top billing on this one, and in a giant font, whereas Nielsen merely gets introduced after. So confidence in their leading lady then, huh? I would fast forward this one, just for some lovely scenery. Speaking of Conan, here comes Conan the Destroyer. It's probably like Red Sonja, worth checking out for a few set pieces, some production design, and the practical effects going on. A lot of this stuff is naff, but seeing things for real on screen, and then wondering what it might be like if the film was made 2 decades later, and it was all green screen, yeah, it's worth a peek. It sort of fits in the mold of, like, the Krolls of the time. Men on a mission across a treacherous wasteland, just not as kid-friendly. Collateral Damage. Arnold's family are killed in a terrorist bomb, and he goes rogue to find out who did it. Who are the bad guys in this utter snooze fest of a film from Andrew Davis, he of The Fugitive and Under Siege fame. Maybe this is Arnold's apology to him for having him kicked off The Running Man. Some apology, this is utter garbage. There are no standout anythings in this, the cast can't help either, and the twists aren't appreciated, largely thanks to the audience not caring. Killing Gunther. Good God, what is this shit? And oh look, my old friend Saban Films are back. Even one of the world's biggest stars is not safe from them, but those stars are attracted to quick and easy money but for little effort. You'd think Arnold would stand against such laziness just as a principle, and yet here we are. Arnold is undoubtedly a star, certainly in his time. What he is not, though, is an actor. You don't see Arnold heading up courtroom dramas or playing crippled people in wheelchairs with autism looking for an Oscar. But you'd think that he'd made some small effort to be a better performer, and Killing Gunther is the antithesis of that ideal. This is all noise and editing with the hope that it distracts you to thinking that you are being entertained, and Arnold does his bit part, mainly in the third act, in over-the-top fashion, just showing off and doing silly shit as if the cameras weren't even rolling. Messy, self-indulgent, poorly filmed, and a real low on this list. Red Heat. Arnold and James Belushi was the hot order for 1988? No, it wasn't. Apparently that was the other film, Twins, with Arnold and Danny DeVito. Red Heat was the dud that landed that year. Arnold is a stoic and humorless Russian officer in the States playing fish out of water to James Belushi's foul-mouthed copper as they try to chase down an escaped Russian bad guy played by Edo Ross. This is Walter Hill behind the camera, and it does actually have a very similar vibe as the 48 Hours movies he directed before and after, if a little more sinister. Belushi is doing his thing, and it usually works, but there probably should have been more of it between him and Arnold to help balance out the seedy, dour feeling stenching up the rest of the film. Check out Pruitt Taylor Vince before he got huge, Gina Gershon in an early role, and possibly the lamest end to a third act in history where the good and bad guy just walk toward each other in the smoke and fire their guns until the bad guy dies. Underwhelming doesn't even cover it. The Last Stand. This was Arnold's big solo comeback to the cinema screens after playing politics for over a decade, and it's an odd choice. Arnold is a small-town sheriff who gets tipped off that an escaped criminal is headed his way, and he has an arsenal of goons doing his bidding. Arnold rallies the town into shape and acts as the best defense. The film is split between splatterfest action and dumb action comedy, and it keeps flipping between the two, so you can't take it seriously, and even when things seriously happen, they kind of fall flat. I mean, like, has Luis Guzman ever been an actor that has been taken seriously in anything? I know Johnny Knoxville isn't here for his acting chops, but then there's Forrest Whitaker doing his usual worthless serious supporting role. And then there's Arnold, who bizarrely is the only one here, along with the director perhaps, that seems to be competent at doing both the serious and the comedy. They just don't mesh well together. Escape Plan is where Arnold and Sly got together properly for their first fling since The Expendables. As a science fiction prison drama, it starts okay, livens up when Arnold is on screen, goes on for way too long, and then ends. Other than it being a team-up movie of the two 80s action gods, it's actually pretty forgettable. But Arnold does score points for running his mouth off against his opponents. End of Days. Arnold versus the Devil. Well, it had to happen at some point. Arnold looks good with the stubble look. This is an engaging premise, and Gabriel Byrne is probably the best thing in it as Old Nick himself. But this is another case of an Arnold latter move getting away from itself and with too much runtime. The film is bogged down with horror tropes not worthy of Arnold's talents. He's unsure of this territory, brave that it is that he's entered the horror field, his first time perhaps since the Terminator, but Arnold vs. the Devil is all about the supernatural, not the muscle swinging or gun totting, although it has both. The supporting cast are largely swept to the sidelines as we go from one set of evildoers to the next. The film is maybe worth watching for Udo Kier, trying to act as weird as possible whilst the devil has a three-way with his wife and daughter, which sees them morph into one body? Not sure what that was all about, but it was weird. I guess you wouldn't expect less from Udo Kier's family. Otherwise, this is a massive letdown and an epic fail for all involved. Eraser. Weirdly, Eraser was the first screeching halt the tires made to Arnold as the king of action. His last two back-to-back actioners were Terminator 2 and then True Lies, both with Cameron. This seemed like a sudden descent as a result. The poster with the giant laser guns didn't help, despite the marketing teams probably thinking it would. Why would Arnold need such a preposterous thing, yet alone two? This time, he's a guy who specialises in faking the deaths of witnesses and making them disappear. But of course, there is corruption afoot, enter James Caan, and soon our Eraser is on the run with potential victim, what's her name? Vanessa somebody, and he has to avoid crashing airplanes, CGI crocodiles, and James Caan. James Caan seems to be almost bored in this role, and bored does rear its head in the third act when all things just get plain stupid, especially with the giant guns. You've Been Erased just isn't as catchy as You're Terminated. Raw Deal. Raw Deal speaks for itself in that it was not a film Arnold wanted to make. He was obliged to do so. Before this, Arnold picked Conan, The Terminator, and Commando, and then after this, he picked Predator. So you can see that he had a talent for scripts and ideas. This, however, was something that he was lumbered with, and he clearly is miscast. A disgraced agent now working as a small-town sheriff, opportunity knocks when a mobster kills the law enforcement son of a bureau guy that he knows. The grieving father needs him to come in and work outside the law just in order to help him take down the bad guys. This is about as close as Arnold gets to the Punisher, I guess, and thinking of it that way, it has its moments. Sadly, the massive explosion is wasted in the first act as he fakes his own death. Oh boy, what a way to go. He then sets about taking down the mobsters via illegal casinos, one after the other, until they grow wise to who he is, and then he goes on a death rampage in the third act. To be fair, it actually probably is better now than it was back then, so I've bumped it up a few spots. So, worth a peek perhaps. Terminator Dark Fate. Well, insult was added to injury with this. Cameron famously criticised Alien 3 for ruining his happy ending to Aliens. Well, Cameron, you are a writer on this one, and you are just as responsible for ruining the happy ending to Terminator 2. and then rinse and repeating that story. Dark Fate is technically well made and lets Arnold try something bafflingly new. Linda Hamilton probably does the best dramatic work in the film, and then everyone else is utterly forgettable. And mostly unnotable is the character of the girl who is meant to be the new savior of society. Seriously? There is some half-decent action in this, but it is a misstep, despite being a step up from the fifth film. Conan the Barbarian. I will apologise for this one because I simply have only seen it a few times and I'm never in the mood for it. I don't know what it is about this side of the fantasy genre that I just can't commit to as a major fan. Always happy to give it a first watch with these sort of films, but then I'm kind of one and done with them, and Conan is a great example of that. When I rewatch this film, I get itchy feet. I want to hit fast forward, and even then I'm not satisfied. And then there's the glorious landscapes, sets, props, and music to behold, and yet all my brain can say is, hurry up! I'm bored. It's going too slow. How long do I have to sit watching James Earl Jones staring down the barrel of the camera? Get on with it. Man, these muscle dudes fight slowly, etc. So it's unfair and I admit it, but there it is, and here it sits. The end of the film insists Conan will be back, and he was. Sadly, King Conan still needs to become a thing. Last action hero. A real cock-up at the time, losing dollars and especially dignity to Jurassic Park. This film was bent into too much of a kids' movie, so the humour, the action, and well, the drama is all a bit toothless, save perhaps for Charles Dance as an engaging villain. Arnold tries to really send himself up in this one and does make for a few decent jokes, but as I just said, they are all really tame. Despite John McTiernan and Shane Black working on it, it really ought to be lower on this list, but I can't this time round drop it below Terminator 6. Well, not for now anyway. Arnold does his I'll be back thing, and the result sums up the movie for me. We are way ahead of you, Arnold, and you are not surprising us anymore. The Sixth Day is one of those films worth coming back to every now and again just to see if it's aged any better. Sci-fi has a habit of doing that, turning from great to crap and vice versa. The Sixth Day has ideas, action, and a pretty good name cast. The problem is that the director isn't too confident and it falls into parody sometimes, but it is still worth a watch for the science fiction, the idea about cloning. The bad guy list is pretty good, headed up by Tony Goldwyn, who has an arsenal of colourful henchmen including Michael Rooker, Terry Crews, some girl who I'm sure is an inspiration for the Matrix Resurrections, and some dude who thinks he's Stephen Dorff. The Sixth Day does not have great filmmakers behind the camera, but it does have some fun ideas and some moments of comedy that work. Greta Thunberg's cameo is one of them. All of the sub-villains keep getting killed off by Arnold over and over again, only for a new clone of them to be hatched and come out after him, one of whom insists that he can still feel the pain of his previous death. There is a terrifically evil moment when Goldwyn's main bad guy gets cloned himself as he's been shot, and the new clone immediately starts to strip him of everything, clothes and everything, so he can move on. The hurt look in the dying man's face is priceless. So comedy galore. So it's a mid-level oddity with many pluses and minuses. I think Arnold said it best when it comes to the rewatch.
I might be back.
Terminator 3. Seems almost wrong to have this film so high, but we need to remember that the film was actually pretty good in terms of its production. Jonathan Mostow made a brave effort when making this one, and a couple of set pieces came close to the second film, so admiration for that. It also wins points for the dystopian ending. Well, if you are going to continue the franchise, then you may as well try that ending out, I suppose, which paved way to the fourth movie, which also took some risks before 5 and 6 reeled it back to what they thought audience wanted, which was to see Terminator 2 for the first time again. Sorry folks, aside from encountering brain damage, this is only ever going to happen to you once at most. The downside is pretty much everything else. Arnold isn't quite what he was, the recasting is merely okay or subpar, some of the action or ideas are a bit goofy, and the new villains seem less of a threat than the last one. Nothing deal-breaking quite yet, but certainly missing a few spare parts. True Lies is a real middle-of-the-road okay of a movie that succeeds way more than its comedy department than it does as a spy movie. In fact, the spy aspect is mostly in the beginning before it gives way to Arnold stalking his own wife, and then the third act, things are rejigged into full action porn, but it's a lower rating. Cameron seems to have cancelled making movies for adults after Aliens, and seems set to satisfy the middle crowd with more bucks in their pockets. True Lies may have worked wonders with the relatively new green screen at the time, but it was seen as a major step down from what he had done with Terminator 2. But despite its bloated running time, like there's any other kind with Cameron, True Lies still manages many elements of fun. Bill Paxton is clearly the highlight of all of these, but to be fair, the rest of the cast even tries to get some sort of a win along the way when Arnold and Jamie Lee Curtis aren't hogging the screen. Well, it is their film, and they both acquit themselves admirably, even if they are asking Jamie Lee Curtis to get into her undies. The dumb action finale is, well, dumb, so not particularly exciting, but Cameron will go bigger and bigger. Sometimes that is better, but not here. Sabotage was an interesting choice for Schwarzenegger, and he leaned hard into gratuity here in the sense of doing something for proper adults. Sabotage sees a team of DEA agents led by Arnold who crash a drug lord's house and have decided to rip off 10 million for themselves. The problem is that after they go to fetch the money, it's gone missing. And on top of that, their bosses put them all on suspension for 6 months, as they quite frankly think that they have robbed a ton of cash, which they did. So they did the crime and are doing the suspension time, but no cash to show for it. 6 months passes and then they are reinstated and then get to work trying to locate the money. Most of the team are played by named players, and suddenly they all start getting bumped off Agatha Christie style, one by one. Who is killing the team, and can investigator Olivia Williams and figure out what's going on. This one was co-written and directed by David Ayer, finding his directing feat, and it isn't ashamed to go full bore. The issue with Sabotage is that every person on screen is an absolute swine of a person. Arnold's team are just filthy, foul-mouthed aggressors, and the one lady on the team, a very game Muriel Enos, is probably the most vulgar out the lot. But what are you supposed to do when all your good guys are just filthy-minded constantly? Sam Worthington is in a slightly redemptive role, provides a few moments of humanity along the way, but none that anyone else really has. And yet, the film is still engaging. Rewatching it does have value, as it is such an anomaly in Schwarzenegger's filmography, and it has stood out. It may stand out for worse reasons than others, but for the sake of art for art's sake, I let it stand out higher, as it has at least got a personality. Terminator 2. The big shock on my list has arrived, and everyone who thinks the sun shines out of Terminator 2 Judgment Day's arse will do their nuts. Yes, there is always one, but hear me out. I don't not like the film, I just think its reputation has lived out its purpose, and now we need to adore some other things that might be a little bit better or more subtle. I don't think subtlety is in the dozens of skulls in the post-apocalyptic playground opening, or the very finessed wire work of the bike stunt, or the kid's ginger mullet, or John f***ing Connor and how annoying he is, and this f***ing line. Really isn't cool. Translate it. It's not a cool send-off. Just because it's in f***ing Spanish shouldn't make it any cooler. Ugh. Head scratcher. Look, Arnold is great. Hamilton is great. And the T-1000 is great. The FX were groundbreaking, but they were yesterday. Great for what they were and what they did, what they paved the way for, but I also remember at the time the hurt being that Arnold is no longer the bad guy Terminator. Making Arnold the hero might have made him a proper household name and it's a household franchise, but it knocked the teeth out of the character. He is literally told not to kill anyone in this film, and that sucks. And 4 movies later, they have still not properly rediscovered that version of the character again, because Arnold can't handle being the baddie. Terminator 2 also has a morose feel to it, and even cruelty about it that doesn't sit comfortably with me, so I never get the urge to put it on. I probably watched it to death back in the 90s, so that didn't help, but then I've watched other films more and still don't return to this one. Terminator 2 has elements about it, whether it's the style, the music, or the hardball Sarah Connor that keeps fucking up and getting hit. That just makes me think that it isn't all it's made out to be. It has a reputation for sure, but it's time to reevaluate methinks. Maybe then we will stop regurgitating this one over and over again if people finally realise it's not God's or even Cameron's greatest gift to the science fiction action universe. That would be Aliens. Commando. This was my personal entry into Arnold the muscle-bound hero, and it did so with confidence. Alright, the steel drum soundtrack was James Horner being lazy and pulling it from his 48 hours work, and the ice cream bit is a bit cringe. This film gave us a guy who, the moment he gets threatened, immediately turns on the bad guys. He doesn't have to think about it, he is immediately on the rampage, and that was very refreshing back then. I thought there would at least be a bunch of talking or shoving around a la First Blood before the action kicked in, but nope, Arnold is off to the races. Boom, bye, boom, bye. Right, who's next? And even when they do get the drop on him, it isn't long before he snapped a dude's neck, jumped off a plane while it's taking off, ripped a car away from its seat. Wait, yeah, that sounded more Arnold. Chased some weasel down, tipped his car over, not before dropping this weasel off, taken on Bill Duke, and then mounted a one-man army against an island full of bad guys. So by the time it comes to taking on South American Ernst Stavro Blofeld and I Want to Break Free, you've already had one heck of a time. Blow off some steam, sure. Commando does the trick every time, so yes, I will be back. The Running Man. Still to this day, the most underappreciated of all of Arnold's action movies. Even by him, but even by last year's critics who reviewed the latest redo of the story. For the record, that film may have been closer to the book, but it still gave a weak source of an ending, i.e. the hero doesn't commit suicide by flying a plane into the bad guy in his headquarters. The Arnold one is so unapologetic in its machoisms. The film has a great pace. Okay, the stalkers need to hit the gym, but at least each of them had personality, if not great physiques or outfits. Jesus, Jesse, what were you going to do in that? The one-liners are daft. I'll Be Back is in there. The TV host is an absolute bastard. Maria's shitty acting can always give me a giggle, especially when Arnold is chasing her around her apartment. The kills are gratuitous enough for 1987, and Harold Faltermeyer provides a decent score. What else do you need from Arnold? For those of us at the time, this is the source, and those that discovered Arnold from the 90s onwards, or twins for that matter onwards, they prefer the weaker variety. I'm listing this one high because it not only partly predicted the future, it completely blows the redo away every day. The Terminator. So this is where the I'll be back nonsense started. Personally, I think the first 3 times he said it were all accidents before someone said, hey, you say that line a lot. But you know, feedback wasn't fast back in the 80s, so not everyone was quoting a line from the Terminator immediately, but I'm sure Arnold would tell us otherwise just to sell you on something. But then there's no denying what this film did. I did almost have the goal to drop it a couple of spots, because as much as it has more finesse and nuance than Commando and The Running Man, those films are always way more fun for me. But then, I always remember the high points of this film, the concept, the design, the main players, and of course James Cameron, plus our man is the bad guy, and he did play it to perfection. You just need to look at the Conan movies before it, and then Commando after it, to see how different a performance he is putting on here. The look of the film may be dated, but it's a time travel story, so it's not meant to look like now. It's set in 1984, so it looks like 1984. It was made in 1984, so it is decent. And the shonky score from Brad Friedel matches, so the collars and the cuffs match. A deserved hit ranking. Total Recall. This was for a short time, probably around the time it came out, my all-time #1 Schwarzenegger movie, just because he was at the zenith of his blood and gore and violence. Easily Arnold's most bone-cracking, neck-snapping, arm-ripping, bloodiest best. And it was science fiction, and it had Paul Verhoeven directing, upping his game even from RoboCop. But subtlety it had none of, and that has cost it the #1 spot for me down the years. It has moments of beauty for sure, largely in Jerry Goldsmith's score, but some of the visuals or some of the design are horribly brutalist or just favela-looking garbage. Can't fault the dialogue or any of the main villains we get. There are 2 very strong female performances in the main cast as well, and a ton of imagery you are likely to never have seen before. It was glorious and still is. There's just one that is aged better, and that film is Predator. Anytime someone with muscles or brawn tries to take on the mantle of action hero, this is the film I stack them up against. Have you got a Predator in you, worthy star? Where is your Predator movie in your back catalogue? And then if they don't have that, I then ask, okay, do you have a Terminator or a Commando for Christ's sake? Do you have a property that made you the star that you are, the action star? And more often than not in recent years, the answer is no. They don't have one, because action keeps threatening to go the way of the dodo. Thank God we still have stuntmen fighting the good fight, and for having their own Oscar award coming around in the next couple of years. Hopefully that will ensure interest in the genre again, and give us some more work. At this stage, Arnold already had a Commando, and a Terminator, and a Barbarian under his belt. And after 1987, he would go on to even bigger successes, with even more violent and bloody affairs. But here, he nailed the epitome of the hard action guy, and they needed to pit him against something out of this world to prove it. And prove it they did. The script works almost as bare bones as it needs to be, but does rely on the first half of the film to build tension as we explore the jungle with Arnold's team. We see them in combat, and then it's a simple case of walking out of the jungle, until of course the Predator comes calling and starts to take the team down one at a time. John McTiernan directed assuredly and kept tension throughout the film from start to finish. Everything was about suspense and tension, with the fast payoff of a kill that then bewildered the group and made the tension rise even further. McTiernan is the only one here to outdo himself beyond this film, which he did the following year with Bruce Willis in a high tower action movie. Arnold reached his peak, but it is a very worthy mountain to have climbed. And that's it. That is my Arnold Schwarzenegger thriller action movie ranking. I will be doing Jean-Claude Van Damme next, and that one's going to be even longer. Until then, do follow me on social media and Letterboxd if you have it, and I will speak to you soon.